Hello, and welcome to episode 114 of the Space Policy Show. I'm Colleen Stover with the Aerospace Corporation. In today's show, we talk about mapping a sustainable cislunar ecosystem, that space between Earth's orbit and the moon. Lots of exciting technologies are on the table that could benefit us on Earth, but how do we plan for the infrastructure that's needed to develop and maintain this ecosystem? So to talk about this, we have Aerospace's Ron Birk, who I'm proud to say is also president of the American Astronautical Society. He's got two guests, Dr. Kathleen Howell, distinguished professor at Purdue University, and Dan Dumbacher, the executive director of AIAA, or the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Let's go over to Ron.
Thanks, Colleen. And Kathleen and Dan, great to be here with you today. We're looking forward to having a discussion around the exciting prospects of cislunar ecosystem, establishing a cislunar ecosystem. And we're fortunate to see significant progress at the national level in terms of developing a national cislunar strategy that calls for a sustainable cislunar ecosystem, and many activities across the community that are focused on building up capabilities in multiple foundational layers of infrastructure that are necessary for a sustainable ecosystem. So with that as our topic, Kathleen, appreciate your thoughts on how you see the community coming together in planning and building capabilities for our future.
Well, certainly, I think the entire community is, in fact, focused on this right now. And it's, bringing forth a lot of new ideas, a lot of innovative type of strategies and so on. And I think that that's really, great to see. Everybody is excited about it. And so many of the technical challenges that we're facing in order to enable this is ongoing. People are thinking about it. They're talking about it. It's also true in academia that we're thinking about the future too. How are we going to develop not only some of the new concepts that are needed, but also to prepare for the future workforce?
All right, fantastic. And Dan, your thoughts on what's happening out in the community and what you see as next steps?
Well, you see, like Kathleen said, you see the community all coming together, lots of activity. Great commercial companies emerging, new companies with new ideas, new innovations, and all the way through to Starship getting ready to fly and good progress on those fronts. Artemis 1, lots of activity, and now the hardware is becoming real, and we're starting to get to that next step. So it's the broad industry, government, academic community is, we're making good progress. We have challenges ahead of us, but that's the fun part. And we're making sure we keep on working. It's quite an exciting time right now, and everybody is rather enthused, and you see it around the community everywhere you go.
Fantastic. So as we get underway with sharing thoughts and perspectives over the course of this episode, we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at the why. Why is all of this interest out there? What's driving these plans for developing this green field of cislunar space? A little bit around the how, and then what many people are interested in hearing is when. When do we see these things happening? So in terms of the why, there appear to be a number of drivers. Dan, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on what you see driving not just the government, but also the private sector in investing in cislunar.
Well, I think what you see driving, certainly the private sector, is the economic opportunity and the future that it holds. There are the broad visions to get lots of people to Mars. There is also the large opportunity to build those economies and to create new opportunity, take advantage of what you can do in zero gravity and microgravity, and build that future, along with all of the excitement you see from an exploration scientific perspective, with what we're getting out of the James Webb Space Telescope, what we're seeing with the Artemis 1 mission, and then leading on to the future missions, people want to see expanding that horizon or expanding that human neighborhood, as a friend of mine likes to say, and continuing to push forward and build that economic opportunity. It's all coming together.
All right. And Kathleen, as we're thinking about this, and as Dan shares the economic perspectives, there also appears to be what we're lightheartedly or euphemistically referring to as the egonomics of the equation. That there is a real value in developing capabilities in the cislunar domain, because as someone recently shared, it's the one accessible place where everyone on Earth can see every day, right? So when we're doing things in that domain, everybody can track those activities. Kathleen, appreciate your thoughts on some of the reasons why you see all of this coming together in this time frame.
Well, I think you mentioned that everybody can see it every day, and that means that there is something there for just about everybody. I think a lot of the commercial companies are focused on the space-based services that are perceived to open up in the future, but we'd rely on some of them now. And so I think that actually encourages folks outside of our industry to be interested and support what's happening. There's also, lots of thoughts about how this environment, space in general, learning more about it can help protect the Earth and address some of those types of challenges as well, including from the environment and so on. And so there's almost like something for everyone there. And even in the general population, they see that in a positive light. Now, in academia, we've also seen interest, increase. All of us across the country are seeing, especially in the aerospace and related types of disciplines, just enrollment is just skyrocketing, because that also the young folks are really interested in and see a future for themselves, not only in the exploration piece of it, but also in those commercial activities that it can improve what's happening on Earth.
All right. So appreciating there's several different compelling reasons for why people from across the community are making these investments. One of the challenges that we've looked at is that with some 12 different layers of infrastructure that all need to come together and work together day in and day out, and we're recognizing that there's at least 70 companies and over 10 government organizations that are making these investments. One of the challenges is how do all of these capabilities get coordinated together? And how do people help each other to understand what is expected in terms of interoperability and operational sustainability? Dan, I know you've and AIAA have thought quite a bit about this. Your thoughts on ways to help the community actually be able to have a platform to come together and plan these things out.
Well, Ron, I think it's important from an AIAA. We see ourselves as the convener, that place where everyone can come together and bring all the different perspectives and the different opportunities, and make sure we're addressing the technical challenges and addressing those in the appropriate way. It's that convening, that building the standards, that to get to that interoperability, to address all the different perspectives that you need to solve these problems, and also to make sure that we're looking at all of the intersections or interfaces that need to be addressed when you start looking at propellant depots and power and position nav and tracking and all of these things. Really, they all interrelate at some point. And so we look from an AIAA perspective by putting together a Cislunar ecosystem task force is to help start that conversation and start that convening so that we can pull the technical community together along with the broader economic and programmatic communities so that we can make good progress.
All right. Yeah, that's a fantastic benefit that AIAA is providing that gives people from across the community a place to come together. And Kathleen, from a science and technology standpoint, we recognize there's some interesting challenges, some things that are very different about Cislunar than even LEO and geospace, including areas like differences in radiation, differences in lighting, that wonderful dust everybody looks so forward to being able to interact with there on the lunar surface. Appreciate your thoughts on what Purdue is doing and what other universities are doing to help advance the science and technology to get us ready for dealing with these interesting areas.
There are a lot of unanswered questions and things everybody is anticipating and working on. And I think that there's between all of the participants, I think that there's a new realization that you can't be isolated, that all of these technical issues actually demand input from different kinds of sectors. And so that's an important key. Now, the universities are a good place for us to try to tackle some of the challenges that really require new ways of looking at the problems, of all the different aspects, especially in these regions that we haven't really leveraged a lot before, that we haven't been really visiting a lot before and so on. I mean, it's only been since 2010 that spacecraft have actually focused on these unique cislunar regions. We've been to the moon before, but we've stuck pretty close to the moon and we haven't actually accessed some of these other types of regions. So there's a lot of those technical innovations that are required, and universities are a good place to start those things. But it's also not just the creative, innovative things themselves. We also may need new ways to even implement them. Thinking about that step, beyond just the creating of the original technology, but also how do we actually implement it? So those are things that the universities are engaged in working on and collaborating with both government and industry organizations to try to, jump that gap from the original innovative idea and concept into actually making it implementable. So those are pieces that are important. Equally important is the number of folks that are going to be engaged in it in the next couple of decades. And it's our responsibility also to help build that with cooperation from the other sectors. So I think that the universities are highly engaged, anxious, working with lots and lots of students that we hope join all the other organizations in the future.
So Ron, if I could maybe ask a question.
Absolutely.
With your experience and all the work Aerospace Corporation is doing, along with Kathleen's experience from an academic perspective, what do you guys think are the top 2 or 3 priorities that need to be addressed so that we can make progress quickly?
Dan, I appreciate that, and definitely looking forward to Kathleen's response. Two of the areas that we see as being just of quintessential importance is first, communications and navigation. It's important to stay in comms. We all enjoy our iPhones and our cell phones and ability to stay in close contact with each other. That's certainly going to be important as we build out capabilities in that domain. And the navigation piece is we see as being extremely important as well because of the interesting orbits in the cislunar domain, not the traditional sort of polar orbits that we're used to, but or even geosynchronous, but very rather eclectic orbits, elliptical orbits around the moon. So those 2 areas very important, and then power. One of the enablers for almost everything else is the ready availability of sufficient power to keep everything else working. So those would be the top 2 that I'd offer, and happy to expand and discuss more. But Kathleen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you've hit on some of the really key necessary infrastructure elements that are needed. I'd also add energy storage to that. That's also going to be a big one. And I think that will be important for sustainability in the long haul. We're not, I think the terminology has been used before that we're not visiting anymore. We actually want to stay there. So we have to have the capability to do that. Of course, when you're talking about the different kinds of orbits and so on, that's my expertise. But I would also use that under the word transportation, because really you need to be able to go out, you need to deliver goods and services. You need to get everybody where they need to go, including for the comm and all those types of assessment. And propulsion is also part of that. You have to have strategic development in those areas in order to enable arriving and leveraging all those different types of movement through the system that actually are key new opportunities that we haven't leveraged as much before. And so those are things that are being worked on, certainly in the academic side. I think they're also being worked on in the commercial and government side. Bringing us all together is, I think, one of the key things. I want to harken back to something that Dan said a little bit earlier, which was convening folks. And I think that's also been a critical step in getting these technologies developed, because the first thing that you notice is when you get folks together who come from different parts of this, the comm people along with the transportation people and so on, is a recognition from the various groups that they need to understand the other important and key elements. And so they're all eventually going to have to come together, but some of those outstanding challenges going forward are the ones you mentioned, Ron, transportation in a broader sense, as well as energy.
Yeah, fantastic.
If I may, can I?
Please, Dan, go ahead.
I want to add one more myself since I asked the question. I'm going to go. Kathy mentioned workforce development earlier, and I want to highlight that, because the demand that we're seeing in the aerospace industry, not just for engineers and scientists, but for the skilled technicians, the people that actually build the hardware, do the welding, and build the electronic assemblies, is really that there is such high demand out there that there are lots of activities that need to be done to inspire the new generation, reach into those communities that we have not typically reached into, or not aware of what can be done, or what are not aware of the opportunities, so that we can help grow the aerospace workforce. I mean, one thing we know is that careers in aerospace, no matter what your discipline, you're not going to get the richest in the world, but you're going to have a good living, do some exciting work, and really help society move forward. So we want to pull on all of those threads. And in addition to our convening role at AIAA, we're also working on that workforce development, because it is a key issue or challenge for the whole industry.
Yeah, Dan, that's a great point. We've recognized that that demand for space capabilities and talents exceeds supply even today. So as space continues to grow, that will continue to be a challenge. I've been impressed with the thinking that's going on with the Space Workforce 2030 activity. Multiple companies have come together to begin thinking about what can be done to build up that workforce, which is fantastic. And that's a nice segue, actually, to thinking about, so when are we going to see major milestones? We've got a national space policy that calls for permanent human presence on the moon. And we hear all of these different elements are definitely sort of enabling that path. Having a sustainable cislunar ecosystem is going to be foundational to permanent human presence on the moon. So Kathleen, if we can throw this back over to you, your forecast of when sort of critical thresholds of capability are going to be in place.
Well, that's actually I guess 2 or 3-fold question, because there's the technical issues, there's the workforce issues, but there's just also in general the public awareness type issues. And so as we move the technology forward, we also have to be sure that we encourage confidence that we can actually operate and sustain this in a long period of time. Of course, we've already talked about some of the economic challenges, but I think exactly how we are moving forward, how much support we have, how much investment we have will depend on exactly what the timeline is. But we need to be able to see steps occur, I guess. And that's not only for within our community. I also think that there's a cultural aspect to this. And so we have to be able to share all of these wonderful steps that we do take with the broader community, with the public, and make sure that we do two things. One is to ensure that folks in general within the industry as well as out have confidence in the steps that we're taking. And two, that we think about, do some forward thinking on how we give access to a broader a section of the public in general and make them part of this. And I think that will contribute to how soon this can all occur.
And really important insights and thoughts on that path. All right, Dan, over to you.
Well, I'm in Kathy's boat. I think a lot depends on how we address the challenges. What's going to be interesting to me, Kathy alluded to it. Unfortunately, a lot of this comes down to money. The available funding to go address the technical challenges, the development of the marketplace, and what are those market opportunities to help drive the business plans and business success to make this successful. So getting that market developed and grown, getting the technical challenges addressed so that the growth of that market can be facilitated, and then eventually expanding it beyond just where we are with low Earth orbit now, out to Cislunar, out to the lunar surface. There's lots of opportunity. It's just going to be a matter of getting the right people working on the challenges, work on those challenges, get the investment flowing, and making sure the workforce is there. I'm actually optimistic that we're going to see this build momentum over time. And the technical challenges are always a little harder than we like to think. They take a little bit more time than we like to think. But as we get some of those challenges addressed and build the momentum, I think we'll see this rapidly increasing, and the next generation and the generations that follow will have lots of opportunity, and who knows where they're going to take us.
And if I could just follow up on that a bit, Dan, you said something in the past too, earlier, that we talked about this kind of moving out to the moon and Mars. And so we've talked about all those things for a long time. But this is a unique time because the technical things are becoming real. And that's what you alluded to. We're done with the talk. Now it has to actually happen. We actually have to see those things, and we should celebrate every success along the way.
And I will submit, we also need to celebrate every failure along the way too, because that's how we're going to learn. And we need to make sure that as we learn things along the way, we take advantage of it and move on quickly, and keep the momentum going.
Yeah.
Which means that, we have to accept the risk.
Absolutely. Build, test, learn, right? And we're so fortunate, Kathleen, to your point, we're recognizing that there's somewhere on the order of $10 billion being invested in the current time frame in cislunar capabilities. The majority is still government funding, which is good. It's foundational for exploration. But we are seeing substantial amounts of investment from the private sector as well. And many of the private sector participants are, Dan, to your point, looking ahead. They're looking to a time when their basis of operations is going to be commercial to commercial, as well as commercial for the government for continued exploration. So very, very exciting. So, are we thinking the 2030 timeframe might be a time for significant milestones, maybe a little before, a little after?
Well, I'll jump in. I hope it's not that long.
Okay.
I think we're going to see elements of it happening more quickly, particularly as we see things like the new launch vehicles, Starship, New Glenn, Artemis come online, and that capability becomes developed, and then the marketplace starts to drive the economics and help drive the efficiency, the cost efficiency into things. Now the hurdles will disappear or go away. And then more of this innovation and creative thought will come in about how to use those applications, how to use the zero gravity, microgravity environments. What can I get from the moon that I could use here on Earth, or even use in the cislunar economy itself? So I think it's going to come, I think the 2030s, we stand here 10 years from now. The success we've seen over the last 10 to 12 years has been very impressive. And I think it's going to grow on an exponential rate over the next 10 years.
Well, and if I could add on to that, I also think that there's a psychological aspect to this, where as we make more positive steps, as some of the technology comes online, what we'd like to see happen is a sense, in the country or even in the world, that this is a necessary step, that this has to happen because it's necessary to do all of the things that we elucidated at the beginning of this discussion.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, all of this together really recognizes the value of cislunar master planning, right? Not so much coming up with a master plan, because that's not really consistent with the idea of the dynamic development that we're talking about, but actually having an ongoing master planning effort, like industrial park master planning or city master planning, that there's ongoing effort among the stakeholders to share plans and ensure that the individual plans and progress are all compatible and able to be mutually reinforcing. So as we sort of wrap up our discussion here today, welcome your thoughts on key points that we would like to share with our audience, and encouragement for their engagement and planning for the cislunar domain. Kathleen, if you can share your thoughts.
So I think if we're talking to the more general population, or the more general reasons to go forward, I think, of course, one of the most significant things is, access to space, and the cost for that, has to come down a little bit. And some of that will happen with technical developments, so that would be a positive thing. But just awareness and understanding of what's going on in the larger community in your particular lane is also a key element going forward. And as Dan said, that is starting to take place. And so that evolution would occur, I hope, in the next decade for sure.
Fantastic. Dan?
Well, my closing thoughts really revolve around the idea of, in addition to Kathleen's, is let's go do this. The opportunity is there. The time is now. We have the technical challenges to address. Yes, we are building the workforce. We are building our capabilities. Let's move forward. Let's move forward quickly, and let's include those for that workforce we need for the future. Let's include those that typically are not involved with space or involved with aerospace, because this is really about the next steps for society, and moving and providing new capability, new opportunity for humankind. And it's such an opportunity now that the excitement is there, the time is now. Let's go.
And I would say as well that the younger people who I work with every day, the next generation, the upcoming generation, they do not want to wait.
All right. Well, indeed, then let's go. Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, with that, I definitely want to thank you both for joining the policy show today and this valuable discussion. And Colleen, back over to you.
Thank you to everyone for joining us today. The future is nigh, or at least it seems so when it comes to the business of cislunar space. Remember, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast platform. You can find out more from the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at csps.aerospace.org, including our many research papers like the one that Ron co-authored, charting a course through cislunar master planning. The amazing James Liggins is our technical director. Bye for now.